Peace. Welcome back to another episode of We Charge Colonialism podcast and book club. I am Ikemba, member of the Public Relations Committee.
Hey y'all, this is Tierney. I am the steering committee chair for We Charge Colonialism. Excuse me, I'm finishing my breakfast.
Peace, family. This is Frank Maubad, chair for the Political Action Committee, WCC.
All right, and we charge colonialism. So I want to thank everybody for continuing to participate in this book club and podcast as we bring important news to you all and examine great historical readings. So today we're going to continue with Huey P. Newton's The Correct Handling of a Revolution, page 311 for all of those people was with us last week. We're going to continue that up, and then we're going to segue right into another member of the Black Panther Party, Fred Hampton, which is the next chapter. But before we do that, we're going to do what we always do and give you our weekly roundup. So Frank, you picked an interesting story, so I'm interested in hearing where we want to go.
Yeah. The news here today is about France and Macron. Somebody last week, right now he have one more year left. Next year will be election. But right now, I think the local election is on, which will be the 20 to the 27. But right now he's campaigning. So he traveled to, I think, the southeastern part of the country to campaign. And while campaigning, he went to meet the public, and while greeting the public, what happened here? One of the citizens or one of the individuals slapped him, and security rushed on the individual, and he got arrested and things. But the issue I want to focus here is not really about the slap. I don't really care if they slap him. They can slap him 100 times. That's not my business. There is something called karma. Black people are not the one to do it to them, or black people will not do it to them, or African will not do it to them, but their own people will do it to them. So this is what I want to explain about that whole issue there. These European or the Western world have lied to their citizens, and I believe he got slapped not because he's doing the right thing in France, but he got slapped because he's corrupt. He got slapped because he's not providing the needs of the people with all the $500 billion Macron and France take from the African nation every year. He cannot use that $500 billion to provide for his people. So he's being corrupt. So there is one thing here when the Western world come out to say African people are corrupt or African leaders are corrupt. We are not disputing that fact. But you cannot talk about somebody when you are more than that person. How can you take $500 billion every year from somebody? And the people you take the $500 billion from there every year, you call that same people poor, and you call that same people corrupt, and you cannot even go to help these people. And then out of that $500 billion, you take something like $1 million or $2 million and then give it back to the people. And then and then you say you helping the people. Again, within your own country, you cannot use that $500 billion to benefit or to give a livelihood to your people. So what am I saying here is there is more slap to come, not only Macron, but with these European leaders or these Western leaders. There are more slap to come for them the moment African people realize their potential and take back their continent and take back their resources. Well, $500 billion will no longer go to France every year and no more money into their economy. There will be more slap for them because by that time, their own people who have realized that you guys lied to us. You guys told Africa were poor. Africa was poor. But look at what is coming from Africa. Look at what was coming from Africa. Look at the resources you have been exploiting from Africa. Now African people have realized their potential and they have gone back to take what belongs to them. Now we can no longer get what was coming from them to us, we can no longer get it. So this is how rich these people are. And now there will be more hate and more slap for them.
Yeah, just trying to get off mute. Yeah, I agree with you. I think, the big slap is coming real soon. This is part of the work that we're doing, trying to raise the awareness so people understand the contradiction that exists within the global society between the colonizer and the colonized. That's the biggest contradiction that we're dealing with right there. And as more and more people recognize that and understand the only solution to our problem is to, I guess, like, quote unquote, like, slap, but like overturn this system. That'll be the biggest slap to the colonizers, so we can attain control over our resources and so forth. But I think also, like what you raised too, is you're raising the contradiction that exists within the colonial empire. They're dealing with their own contradictions, and they're trying to resolve well, historically, they've been resolving those contradictions by exploiting and oppressing African people, and they have to continue to do that. But it still hasn't resolved completely the contradictions that exist, because there's corruption that does exist with the ruling class within their societies over their own people, and they tend to point to Africa and the corruption that's taking place in these countries. But they're corrupt leaders themselves, but yeah, I don't know if you want to add anything, Taryn.
Sorry. I didn't know you were going to finish it right there. But so some interesting things about that whole slap that I didn't realize. So the guy was actually a right-wing dude. So I guess, like, if anyone remembers, France was having these huge protests called the Yellow Vest protests. And they marketed it as, this is a working class movement, meaning like people who are upset that France, I think they were like doing a lot of taxes on like low, on people who were like, more working class or whatever. So there was this big protest, and a lot of the left in America actually, I remember, sorry if the background's too loud, turn it a little bit. But a lot of people on the left, I remember, were kind of like standing in solidarity with that movement. But the thing that wasn't really explored is that a lot of that movement was also due to xenophobia going on because of the immigration inside of Europe. So there's a lot of people who are coming into Europe, obviously, particularly from Africa, because Africa, like Frank and Kimba pointed out, is the most poorest, most colonized place in the world. So it's just an interesting context, because it reminds us that there's a lot of contradictions on multiple levels inside of the colonial system. And it reminds us that their own system is collapsing on them. It's not even just that we're fighting them. Their own people are fighting them. This is the right-wing person inside of France. France is a white supremacist country. Their own people are revolting against that same system. And so it's just a reminder to me that the colonial system is not just not sustainable for African people, but it's not even sustainable for their own people. It's going to have to come to an end. You can't keep this type of system going indefinitely. It's going to collapse, whether because of internal friction or because of external friction. So that was a takeaway that I had from it.
Yeah. So, like I said, this was an interesting story, but I think, Frank, you definitely laid out how even just something that we look at as just a slap really exposes a bigger contradiction that is existing within France and within, this global society, colonialism just in general. But we can move on to the next story. Tierney, you are covering what's taking place in Mali. We've been talking about Mali a lot.
Yeah, Mali's an interesting place right now because there's just like multiple levels of things going on. Like obviously you have the French presence in Mali, and then you also have the transitional government inside of Mali, where they basically had a revolution a year ago and got rid of their president and had an interim president. I mean, it's like a lot going on there. But this story that we're going to be talking about is actually about it's more, I think, about the hypocrisy of the human rights world, the United Nations, the ICC, all of them. So there's been reports that were disseminated that the insurgent groups inside of Mali have been committing war crimes. And now there's talks essentially of setting up a tribunal for Mali war crimes. So things that they're listing is that there's been rapes, there's been murders, killing like civilians and all types of things like that. All horrible things. This is not a justification of that if that's what's happening, if what's being reported is what's happening. But it's just very interesting that every single tribunal that has existed for war crimes, it's never been against the Western powers. They always find ways to get around these institutions that they've created, like the ICC. In fact, I don't know if you guys caught, I was watching, it was a interview between Ilhan Omar inside of America and Anthony Blinken, who's the US Secretary of State. And she's basically saying, well, when the United States commits war crimes or human rights violations, who's going to hold the US accountable? And he's like, well, we have protocols, and if we want to, we will submit to the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court, which is crazy. Like, what type of criminal would willingly submit to the court without being forced to? So these are just the contradictions that exist. And I think it's just important for us to question, why is it that the major genocides, why was there never an inquiry into the genocides that were sponsored by the West? Even the Rwandan genocide, we're finding out more and more that France was very much complicit inside of that. Why was France never held accountable? So that just really shows us that the human rights field is really created for them, by them, and to ensure their power. And no inquiries will be made of the many, and in my opinion, more significant, more impactful violations that are being done by Western countries on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I unite with that. I think you laid it out pretty clear. When you think about colonialism is a war crime. We are seeing the effects that's taking place in Mali, that's taking place wherever African people are, of war crimes committed by Europeans. And I include the United States, when I talk about, white people who are the ruling class in this country, as, descendants of Europeans. But I think like African people, the conditions that we're living in is an effect of these war crimes and a continuing war crimes that's committed. Exploiting, I think, looting countries of their resources should be considered a war crime. And also the funding that's taken place of these governments, corrupt governments throughout history, African governments, should be considered war crimes. Because of the atrocities committed in the Congo. Who is it? Mobutu? Am I saying it correct? Yeah, the U.S. supporting this dictator, that should be considered a war crime. But these are things I think that you laid it out, as I said, pretty clear. Just who's determining what is a war crime, and it's the people who are really committing these crimes that are determining what's legal and what's illegal. And that's continuously happened throughout history. Africans in this country, after slavery, they decided on what's legal behavior, what's illegal behavior. And then, so you had mass incarceration happening during Reconstruction as a result of Black codes and Jim Crow laws and so forth. I sort of look at these things in the same way, the colonizer determining, who's doing what. And I don't want to minimize what's taking place too in Mali, because there are atrocities that are happening. But we have to, think about this region of the world, West Africa, Mali, which was once the place of several empires. This was the home of several empires. You had the richest person who ever walked the planet of Earth who lived there. This was a center of learning at one time, all before colonialism. And so now what you're seeing is it was a disruption of this way of life. And now these people are dependent upon their colonizer. I don't like to say former colonizer because sometimes that's what goes through my mind, but but I don't know, Frank, if you wanted to add anything.
Actually, before he does, could I add something really quick? Because I forgot to mention one detail because you reminded me. France, just recently, it was revealed that there was a cover up that they actually, I guess, it was a drone attack, I believe it's like a wedding or something like that. Civilians were killed, and all the time they were saying, "Oh, it was just insurgents," or "No, it was just terrorists," and all that stuff. And the people are like, "No, these are like regular people." So no one's going to investigate that. The fact that they covered it up and that they're not even going to be held accountable for that. I just wanted to throw that in. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you see, the African parable says, whenever you see a dog constantly pointing his or her nose at a particular place, which means there is something in our area. Now, there is something in Mali, like Brother Nkrumah, you just said. Mali is a historical empire sitting right in Africa, where the richest men ever to live on the African continent came from Mali. Now, that is not to say we are taking away other kings and queens that were rich during our time, but we are just saying, we are just trying to set the narrative straight here. Now, there is something in Mali when you see constantly these people, or there's a fight over that area when it comes to France, and France supporting terrorism, and when it comes to the idea where France keep killing citizens in our area. Now, Tiani also gave a very good point. You see, the issue here is whenever we allow these oppressors, these Europeans, these Westerners dictate to us what is good and what is bad, we will never have the chance to dictate to these people, no, this is not good, and no, this is not bad. And that is why we always go with their narrative. Here is the thing. The issue here is African leaders, I would say all African leaders, they are very hard to learn. And sometimes you just want to take hammer and just beat it on their head for their brain to open, so that you can take whatever brain they have there and put the real brain there. You see, whenever these European leaders coming together to take African leader to the H or to the RCC, that is what most of the time says. As an African leader, when you get in power, if you don't have money, that doesn't mean you should go and sell yourself to these Europeans and start treating your own people bad. Once you start treating your own people bad, and you're not providing them the basic necessity, African people, we don't need you to give $1 million. We can live together and provide together, like Thomas Sankara was doing in Burkina Faso, where the citizens all work together, and he reduced all government official pay to almost as ordinary citizens. If you do that, that would be fun. But African leaders, they are so greedy to the extent that once they get in power, they go to these Western world or to these Western leaders and take heavy loan or take money, bribe from these people. And once you do that, you're in the hands of the pocket of these people. They will dictate to you what they want you to do. And once you do that, and then when it comes to time where you realize that you have gone against your own people and you want to turn back for your own people, now the Western world going to use that as a propaganda, where you are against your own people and you are not providing for your own people, you are ill-treating your own people. And your people, because they are not educated to know the inside of it, like some of us, we now go against our leaders. And that's the time now the Western world will come to us, telling us how bad this person was, how this person is a dictator, how he's brutal, he's tyranny. And that's the time that will come to us. And now we don't know, we'll go against these same people and kill our own people. And then once we do that, we fight the battle of the oppressor, not our own battle. And then they found another person and put that person into power. That is what been going on the African continent time to time. And we keep saying this, African leader, when you become a leader, do not sell yourself. It's better you and your people work together and make ends meet and provide for the continent or for the country.
Yeah, you laid that out really well. I think like as African people, we have to rewrite the rules to the game. We can't continue playing the same game with these colonies. They're always going to have an advantage over us. They're not going to let us participate in this system and overtake their position of power. So the only way that we can do that is creating an alternative and sitting at the table among ourselves with them not involved and saying like, this is what we're going to do to overturn this relationship that we have. It has to be revolutionary solutions at the end of the day. So our final story, we're going to talk about what's happening in the United States of America, this colonial empire. Nicole Hannah Jones. So she's the just a little background. She's the author of the controversial New York Times 1619 project. That's the terminology that they use, controversial. And it has been controversial. Right now, there's a lot of talk about the 1619 project and critical race theory as well, and how those things connect. So I think this story is definitely fitting for right now. So she recently was denied a tenure position at University of North Carolina, and as a result of this controversy that's surrounding her. And so she's denied this conversations that's being had about why she's being denied this position, and they're exposing just the contradictions that exist at University of North Carolina and their hiring practices and so forth, and how this is like unprecedented. At least, like, that was the words of one person, but some people will argue like not really when it comes to Black people in the United States. So I think this is just an example of what we can see throughout academia, throughout the United States. But we still have to look at even a bigger problem that we have as far as like even wanting to integrate within these institutions and systems anyway. And so that's another conversation. But just going back to the 1619 project, so we're clear on what that is. It's looked it up, a long-form journalism project which aims to reframe the country's history by placing the consequences of slavery and the contributions of Black Americans at the very center of the United States national narrative. So there's arguments that this history is inaccurate. And of course, like, she's been on record as saying like U.S. history is white history. And this is part of the reason why she's considered to be controversial. This project is considered controversial because it is turning history up on its head, American history on its head. American history, I mean, if you look at what Churchill said, he said, and then there's debate on who said it first, but Churchill said that history is written by the victors. If I got it correctly, so history is written by the victors. So he said himself. And so when you think about the last 600 years and who has been controlling the narrative and writing history, it has been white people, and they came up with that categorization of themselves as white people. And so so she didn't say anything that even like Churchill would disagree with. And he's looked at as like, national hero over in Britain. And many people even here in the United States look up to him. And even, Napoleon said that history is a set of lies agreed upon. And so, that's an indictment on the history that we have been taught. And so, I think it's important that we look at what's happening with the 1619 project and also critical race theory. Last thing I want to say about critical race theory, just so we're clear on what that is as well. So it's an academic movement that seeks to critically examine the law as it intersects with issues of race. And so, part of what's happening is this movement. There's people that are analyzing how law has impacted African people in the United States of America, as far as the conditions and the position that we are in, how laws have historically maintained this relationship that we have. And so this is very controversial because they're saying people are using critical race theory in schools and so forth. But yeah, so I know the story, was pertaining to Sister Nicole Hannah-Jones and her not being able to get tenure. But I think the real issue is even wider than that when we delve into it. So just want to open it up and see, if anybody had anything to add.
Yeah, I mean, I seen the whole controversy. To be honest, I get kind of shocked, like in academia, when people are so shocked that the system is racist. I mean, the project in itself examines the present reality of racism in the United States stemming from its inception. And people were shocked that, what institution is she at? Could you remind me?
University of North Carolina.
Okay, so people were shocked that the University of North Carolina was going to treat her with what was consistent with what her whole project explores, the racism of America. If you don't know, the university systems are right in line with white supremacy. They literally have founders who were slave owners. They literally have founders who are capitalist businessmen who are constantly looking for ways to raid, our communities. So when you consider the fact that these universities, they don't have an incentive for African liberation, they have an incentive for African captivity, and you have her go out there and do something like this, it's very commendable that she would do it. But I think people, we have to have like realistic expectations whenever we're dealing with white supremacy. I see a lot of people who do things like join activist organizations, and then they're so shocked whenever they're ostracized. And we have to understand, this is not a play yard. We are literally in a battle for our sovereignty, for our lives, for our dignity. So when you understand that, I think it's unfortunate that she's having a struggle, but I think it's important for all of our people to understand, when you're getting engaged in a struggle, you're getting engaged in something that could affect, your financial livelihood, could affect your promotions, could affect your ability to do things that you've always wanted to do. So that's something you have to weigh out, I think. I'm sure all of us have, and anyone else who gets engaged, this is not to discourage anyone from getting engaged. This is to say that understand what you're doing is necessary, but you're dealing with a very terrible system that's very, very much is not like being challenged. And so do not be surprised whenever the system comes back at you. This is literally what it does. Like, look at Cuba. I was just thinking about how crazy it is that this country kicked the United States out in the 60s, and they're still paying for it. So you have to, whenever you take those steps for liberation, you have to understand the system's going to come at you 10 times harder to try to make an example of you. So that was my takeaway.
Hey, I want to do a better job too of incorporating our viewers into these discussions, because I think we got like the most informed, revolutionary viewers out there. They be sharp. But I just want to read a few things. And Frank, if you wanted to add anything, starting with the Black Cyber Network, he said it's not racial supremacy, it's technological supremacy. Sun Temple, Africa for Black Africans, and Kruma Ture said revolutionary greetings, family. Hello to the esteemed panel, Sister African Esquire. Kevin Cadence, the simple truth is that the persons who are presently African leaders have been allowed to be there by the oppressors and their puppets, the first to have replaced by a truly patriotic African. Forgive Black Cyber Network, forgiveness for slavery is respect for terrorism. Sun Temple, the Chinese can do their construction work in Africa, then they must go. Baruti Katimbo, panelists, do Black people have the will and interest to teach their own kids about race relations, critical race theory, and Afrocentric culture / analysis at home instead of critical race theory in the schools? Or are we too lazy? The Black cyber network separation is the only way forward. Shuffling left and right in the system will not advance our position. So, you know, in the future, I'm trying to incorporate those because I know we're like on a time constraint, but I think we can do that. But Frank, you want to add anything before we transition?
Yeah, let me just add 1 minute. You know, the last time as I was reading something and I saw a quote from, you know, one of our brother, and the person said, and I think I said it last week. The person said, never believe in a story about Africa that is told by the invader. That goes to say that we are not going to believe anything that is told by the West when it comes to our history, that is told by the European when it comes to our history. Here's the thing though. The fact that they ever change the Bible, they change chapters, they change books within the Bible to fit to their narrative. It is that same system that they are still using against us to benefit them, to make them look that they are the truth. Now, I'm not saying that to say I don't believe what the Bible says, because first of all, here's the thing. We know where the Bible came from. We know where Christianity started from. Christianity was part of African religion. And today, there are evidence to prove that Christianity started from Africa. It did not start from Rome. It did not start from the white man Asia. It did not start from the white man Rome or Italy. It started right in Africa. The fact that they changed chapter in the Bible, they changed books in the Bible, that alone proves to you where Christianity came from. That's just what I want to add.
Yeah, that's a good point. It reminds me of Musa Barashingo, I think out of Philadelphia. I remember listening to him do a lecture, and I think he got it from like an African proverb or such. But he basically told a story about this little bird who came to a village and told the children like, "Hey, I ran into a lion today, and I beat him so bad, you know, he ran off kicking and screaming." And the children went to the elders and said, "Hey, how did this little bird? How was he able to beat this lion?" Mm-hmm. And the elders said, "You know, we'll never know until we hear the lion side of the story." And the point being that, you know, Africans haven't been able to tell our side of the story until like, you know, really recently, you know, last, you know, few decades, the creation of departments in academia that's focusing on African people and so forth. And even the development of theories, critical race theory, even though, you know, I feel like our focus should be on attaining power. But these are the effects of white supremacist ideas and so forth. We're combating these ideas. But yeah, so want to encourage, you know, everybody to visit our website, wechargecolonialism.org, find out more information about our organization, and also get involved. You can get involved today. Go to email us at info@wechargecolonialism.org. Someone will get in contact with you, and we can discuss ways that you can help move our organization forward in this fight for the liberation of African people all throughout the world. So today we're going to be starting on page 311 in the Black Radical tradition. And then we may transition into the Fred Hampton reading. So we're continuing with Huey P. Newton, The Correct Handling of a Revolution. And we're starting at the third paragraph. Correct me if I'm wrong, Frank, but I think that's where we're starting at, the third paragraph. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I'll begin. Millions and millions of oppressed people may not know members of the Vanguard Party personally, but they will learn of its activities and its proper strategy for liberation through an indirect acquaintance provided by the mass media. But it is not enough to rely on the media of the power structure. It is of prime importance that the Vanguard Party develop its own communications organ, such as a newspaper, and at the same time provide strategic revolutionary art and destruction of the oppressor's machinery. For example, in Watts, the economy and property of the oppressor was destroyed to such an extent that no matter how the oppressor tried in his press to whitewash the activities of the Black brothers, the real nature and cause of the activity was communicated to every Black community. And no matter how the oppressor tried in his own media to distort and confuse the message of Brother Stokely Carmichael, Black people all over the country understood it perfectly and welcomed it. I did read that last week, but continue. The Black Party for Self-Defense teaches that in the final analysis, the guns, hand grenades, bazookas, and other equipment necessary for defense must be supplied by the power structure. And as exemplified by the Viet Cong, these weapons must be taken from the oppressor. Therefore, the greater the military preparation on the part of the oppressor, the greater the availability of weapons for the Black community. It is believed by some hypocrites that when the people are taught by the Vanguard group to prepare for resistance, this only brings the man down on them with increasing violence and brutality. But the fact is that when the man becomes more oppressive, he only heightens the revolutionary fervor. So if things get worse for oppressed people, they will feel the need for revolution and resistance. The people make revolution. The oppressor, by their brutal actions, calls resistance by the people. The Vanguard Party only teaches the correct methods of resistance. The complaint of the hypocrites that the Black Panther Party for self-defense is exposing the people for self-defense is exposing the people to deeper suffering is an incorrect observation. By their rebellions in the Black community across the country, the people have proved that they will not tolerate any more oppression by the racist dog police. They are looking now for guidance to extend and strengthen their resistance struggle. The Vanguard Party exemplified the characteristics that make them worthy of leadership. Reading that part too, it made me think of what took place during the Civil Rights Movement in Albany, Georgia. Civil rights leaders went to Albany, Georgia, Martin Luther King and others to boycott, to fight against segregation there. And what happened was the police chief and the mayor of Albany, Georgia, saw what took place in other cities and how they were how the white community was attacking, how the police were attacking the civil rights leaders, and they were getting publicity as a result, and it was helping them succeed, and the civil rights leaders succeed in getting what they were demanding. And so what they did is that they just fell back and they didn't attack or resist the civil rights leaders, and they strategically started arresting them for loitering or different crimes. But the civil rights struggle in Albany, Georgia was a failure as a result of that. And so I bring that up to say, like in Huey P. Newton, he's talking about this resistance that's taking place and how a lot of Africans, they're scared to resist because they're worried about the oppressor coming down on the colonizer, coming down on them violently, going in jail and so forth. But I think the point that he's making is that this is going to expose even the contradiction even greater when they do that. And we can see, anybody who's seen the protest that was taking place, a lot of the police was restrained, had to restrain themselves because of what happened with George Floyd, and any more attacks, even though that they were happening, but it wasn't as frequent as you would think it would happen. And I think that had a lot to do with just like not wanting to expose this bigger contradiction between the police and the people.
Yeah, I like so I know y'all read it last week, but I did like that you read that paragraph because it actually reminded me of something I was talking about with someone in WCC about how controlled our media is. Even when we think we're not being controlled, like even something basic as the internet. When you look at the internet, like in Africa, it's like literally being controlled by like Facebook and like I think a small bit is like China or something like that. But and not just that, but like Mark Zuckerberg actually has like ability to like censor content, you know, more significantly over there than he does here. And it makes you think that we have to become serious about having an independent media, you know, not just independent like on YouTube, like real, like independent internet, independent, all that stuff. Because as is pointed out, oppression, like I think like oppression will get worse naturally under capitalism, because the more and more that you have people trying to take advantage of the small bit of resources that exist, the more you're going to see a fight for that. So the more significant that it gets, the more poor people get, the more starving people get, the more you are going to see more revolutionary movements, I think, come about. And what are we going to do if our only means of communication is what the oppressor gives us? So that's just something that we have to deal with, you know, soon, I think.
Yeah, indeed. So right now, we're going to transition to the Fred Hampton reading, Power Anywhere Where There's People. I know ourselves, we weren't even prepared for this, but, you know, we're going to discuss this and analyze it. And I think like this, I'm excited about this reading anyway. They just had the film, you know, Fred Hampton, I think is like really inspired like a new generation of revolutionaries out there. So this was written in 1969. As we know, Fred Hampton was assassinated December 4th, 1969, or we may not know, but that same year. So with that being said, he was 21 when he was assassinated. So he may have been about 20 years old when he wrote this. So go into this. Power anywhere where there's people. Power anywhere where there's people. Power anywhere where there's people. Let me give you an example of teaching people. Basically, the way they learn is observation and participation. You know, a lot of us go around and joke ourselves and believe that the masses have PhDs, but that's not true. And even if they did, it wouldn't make any difference, because with some things you have to learn by seeing it or either participating in it. And you know yourselves that there are people walking around your community today that have all types of degrees that should be at this meeting, but are not here, right? Because you can have as many degrees as a thermometer. If you don't have any practice, then you can walk across the street and chew gum. Hold on. If you don't have any practice, you can't, I guess that's then you can't walk across the street and chew gum at the same time. Let me tell you how Huey P. Newton, the leader, the organizer, the founder, the main man of the Black Panther Party, went about it. The community had a problem out there in California. There was an intersection, a four-way intersection. A lot of people were getting killed, cars running over them. And so the people went down and redressed their grievances to the government. You've done it before. I know you people in the community have. And they came back and the pigs said, no, you can't have any. Oh, they don't usually say you can't have it. They gotten a little hipper than that now. That's what those degrees on the thermometer will get you. They tell you, okay, we'll deal with it. Why don't you come back next meeting and waste some time? And they get you wound up in the excursion of futility, and you be in a cycle of insaneness, and you be going back and going back and going back and going back so many times that you're already crazy. So they tell you, they say, okay, niggers, you want? And they jump up and you say, well, it's been so long, we don't know what we want. And then you walk out the meeting and you're going and they say, well, you niggas had your chance, didn't you? Let me tell you what Huey P. Newton did. Huey Newton went and got Bobby Seale, the chairman of the Black Panther Party, on a national level. Bobby Seale got his 9mm. That's a pistol. Huey P. Newton got his shotgun and got some stop signs and got a hammer. Went down to the intersection, gave his shotgun to Bobby, and Bobby had his 9mm. He said, you hold this shotgun. Anybody mess with us, blow their brains out. Put those stop signs up. There was no more accidents, no more problems. Hey, I just, what he's talking about right there, though, I mean, I can't keep going without just addressing the importance of us like coming together and solving our own problems. he just gave an example of how we go to the government for redress, for solutions, but then we have to go through this, they have this red tape, and we have to go through this, process of coming back to meetings and making arguments and so forth, when to a group of people who are not in the community with us, who can't relate to our conditions and situations. And so I think this is what's being raised, putting theory into practice, understanding there's a problem. This is this is the power of the people right here. I don't know if anybody wanted to add.
Yeah, and I like the point. Well, we'll see if it's the point I think he's gonna make, but that when we try to solve our problems and push back against the government's just no responsive, and they basically ignore us, they're just doing being Negroes, complaining, blah blah blah. As soon as Huey and Bobby picks up the gun, all of a sudden all the attention gets focused in. It also reminds me of how the Black Panther Party had if they were just giving kids breakfast without the guns, I don't believe that the government would have saw that as a threat. But when they see these people who are armed and teaching self-defense, feeding children, all of a sudden this is the biggest threat, to American security. So we have to create our own free breakfast program. The one that exists today is actually stolen from the idea of the Black Panther Party to feed kids breakfast. So it's just funny, as much as the system tells us, non-violence, it seems like that's when they respond, it reminded me of these riots and everything, like Ferguson or Baltimore. Prior to it getting to that level, you just seen people protesting, it was easy to ignore them. But as soon as they started destroying property, as soon as they started going downtown among the white businesses, as soon as, they're throwing stuff back at the police, that's when all of a sudden we want to have a response. Even historically, if you look back at, you had the civil rights era and everyone was like, oh, okay. But as soon as those riots started happening, in the late 60s through the early 70s, it's just funny, how much the system contradicts itself, because they tell us that, violence is never the answer. But apparently that's the only thing that gets their attention.
Absolutely. I think historically too, when you look at it in this country, where Black people were denied their Second Amendment rights, the only Black people who really were able to arm themselves were people who came back from the wars. And so a lot of our communities were left defenseless as a result of that. And when you look at Tulsa, what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Little Africa, you had a community who had people who came to the defense of one of their neighbors, one of their community members, but they were outgunned, they were outarmed as a result of the policies, Jim Crow policies in the United States. And so now you go post civil rights legislation, Africans getting organized, not just getting organized, but they're organizing and they're carrying guns and defending their own communities. And this is looked at as a threat, as well as it was the politics that also came with it. I think that posed even a bigger threat to capitalist colonial America. No, Frank, you wanted to add anything?
Quick contribution there. You see, like Tiani was saying, let me project with Dr. King. You see, this was one reason that Dr. King got assassinated. But again, like I said earlier, when you become a public figure as a Black person, and white supremacy are not talking about you or are not against you, is because you are doing the work of white supremacy. Now, I'm not saying to say that Dr. King was doing the work of white supremacy. Now, what Dr. King was doing, it did not affect white supremacy, although he was talking to his people. So at some point in time, he did not agree with Malcolm X philosophy, because what Nathan P. is talking about here, that was Malcolm X exactly saying that, look, if somebody slapped your left cheek, slap the person on their left cheeks so that they can feel the pain. But on the other hand, Dr. King was saying, no, if somebody slap you, don't do it. Go back home and go and sit in your little corner and pray for that person for forgiveness. And God will forgive that person, and that person will come to your house to reconcile with you, to apologize to you. And over time, again, Dr. King, nobody ever came to him to apologize to him, that, or nobody ever came, or the oppressor did not come to Black people and say, you know what, we apologize because you've been praying for so long to God, for God to forgive me, for God to speak to my mind of how I'm ill-treating you, so forgive me. So when Dr. King realized that this cannot work, when he began to turn around and tell his people that I think my approach is not right, that's the time white supremacists saw him as a threat, as a terrorist. And then they kill him. And that is why Nathan P. is talking here. And let me say this. Also, what I got from this reading is that you are not an African because you are born in Africa. You are an African because Africa was born in you. Now, this is the man that was not born in Africa, but he had the African heritage, the African identity, the African in him, saying that how do you give power to the people? You only give power to the people through observation and participation. And that is how African people, when you research our history, learn our history, that was how we learn, through over history, through participation. And that's how, even in classroom and those things, when we were sitting with our elderly people, giving us stories. As they gave us stories, they made us to participate with one another and all of those things. That's how we learn. That's how we became educated in our society. That's how we became part. Everybody became part of a society. So you can see the African in this man when he was speaking to the people, telling the people, let me tell you how it's supposed to be.
Hey, indeed. I'm glad you raised some of those distinctions too. I think that's important. I like how you quantified, said person's little corner. After getting smacked, they go home in their little corner, right? But I think that's the thing about the Black Panther Party that made them such a threat. One of the things, of course, is like they were carrying on the philosophy of Malcolm X. And Malcolm X was, white society couldn't stand Malcolm X because he said, hey, you attack us, somebody punch you or smack you, send them to the cemetery, right? And so, this was a threat to people who have historically, colonialism is a violent institution. It's a violent institution. And so he was telling us to really stand up and fight back. That's the only way that we're going to be liberated. And so the Black Panther Party was carrying that on. And, for many people who saw the film, we saw how that resulted in the death of Fred Hampton, Sr. This is a brother who is 21 years old, Mark Clark, 22 years old, and, was assassinated in their home as a result. And if you really do the study, I want to encourage everybody to read the book, Black Against Empire, because that book really goes into detail about the history of the Black Panther Party. I think it's one of the most detailed histories out there. And when you read the chapter about Fred Hampton, you can see a series of events that really led up to the death of Fred Hampton. And it was police repression of the Black Panther Party all throughout the United States, but particularly in Chicago, where they were inciting violence against the Black Panther Party and gang and social organizations in Chicago, where Fred Hampton was trying to organize these groups. They murdered a few Black Panther Party members prior to the death of Fred Hampton and Mark Clark. They they burned down Black Panther offices. So there was terrorism being committed against the Black Panther Party. And Fred Hampton was looked at as a threat because he was organizing people against that terrorism that was taking place. But I was just want to leave just because for the sake of time, I want to give if any last words Frank and Tierney had, but I want to encourage everybody to definitely join We Charge Colonialism, info at wechargecolonialism.org. And I want you to share this podcast and book club to your network. We want you to encourage people to join us every Saturday at 10 a.m. Because as we spoke about even in the previous reading with Huey P. Newton, the importance of media, the importance of controlling our media and controlling the narrative, because the oppressor is never going to tell our story the correct way. We got to give our story from the position of the colonized, the position of a people who was a liberated and free people until we came into contact with Europeans 600 years ago. But did y'all have anything y'all wanted to add?
Just that I'm looking up Black Against Empire. So thanks for the book.
yeah, that's it. Hey, yo, it's a really good read. I think Brother Joshua Bloom, I think there's another author too out of UCLA, and it's really good. It's not, you're not going to read it and be like, oh, like this is some colonizer stuff. Like it's straight giving you like a detailed history. In fact, stories I've never heard. And I've read a lot of work out of the Black Panther Party movement, Bobby Seale's work, Huey P. Newton, and, several articles. But yeah, it's really good.
And it's an audiobook, so yeah, I can listen to it on the drive.
It's an audiobook?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. All right. Did you want to leave the viewers with anything? And Frank, but let me go through a few these comments. We need to build Kevin Cadence. We need to build out a global homeschooling and remote learning network so we can effectively educate our own children across the diaspora. Definitely. I was just thinking earlier today, it's funny you said that, of how we do have like independent schools out there, African-centered schools, and we sort of have to create a collective among these schools across the diaspora, and sort of be like a mutual aid institution, help each other out. But yeah, so Huey P. Kevin was going in and said, absolutely, sister, we urgently need our own developed technology, period. Here we recognize that there's no such thing as a successful bloodless revolution. Yeah, so some great points. I appreciate everybody participating in the chat. Like I said, I think we have the best viewers out there. Big up. So Frank, any last words?
No, man. No, I think we did a great job, and thank to our viewer, and thank to their contribution as well. That means, they are following, or that means we are doing great because, their participation, their comments as well. They are giving out there. So we are on a great path.
Yeah, and just so I know a few weeks ago, so far as we've been doing our study, we've only read the perspective of one woman, Claudia Jones, but I see two readings that I want to get to. So Angela Davis, and there was another sister, just to give people a heads up. So next week, find it real. Oh, Francis M. Bill, Black Women's Manifesto, Double Jeopardy to be Black and Female. I'm interested in reading that. I haven't read that. So we're going to tackle that next week. Again, thank you everybody for tuning in, and I'll see everyone next week at 10 a.m. Peace.